Some horror films don't just fade from the spotlight, they're pushed into silence. Not because they failed at the box office, and not because audiences rejected them, but because the people who made them quietly stepped away, refusing to revisit the experience. No cheerful interviews, no behind-the-scenes photos, no production anecdotes shared at conventions, only an uneasy absence, as if the set itself left a mark no one wanted to acknowledge. Within the archives of genre cinema are films surrounded by gaps, contradictions, and missing history. Productions where the cast responded to questions with strained smiles, or where directors offered only a short, clipped comment before steering the conversation elsewhere. Films with vanished documentation, lost footage, or entire crews who preferred their involvement to be forgotten. There is a particular kind of dread in these cases, not the dread crafted on screen, but the dread that lingers off it. Something happened, something unspoken, something that caused those who lived through the production to seal their memories behind a door that has remained shut for decades. Tonight, that door opens just enough for us to look inside. These are 15 horror films that exist in a strange twilight, released, watched, and discussed by fans, yet quietly disowned by the very people who brought them into the world. Sometimes the most disturbing stories aren't in the script, but in the silence that follows. Fact 1. The Alien Factor, 1978. The Alien Factor stands as one of the most unusual cases in regional horror filmmaking, a project remembered fondly by fans, yet almost entirely sidestepped by the people who created it. Director Don Dohler, typically meticulous in preserving records of his work, left behind surprisingly little material for this film, an odd omission that has puzzled genre historians for years. Attempts to contact cast and crew have yielded polite but distant replies, with several expressing reluctance to revisit the production at all. Stories told informally describe a shoot marked by grueling conditions. Frigid temperatures made long nights nearly unbearable, and the ambitious creature effects demanded more time and resources than the team realistically had. Many involved were local amateurs, unfamiliar with the rigors of filmmaking, leading to miscommunication, long delays, and moments where frustration hung heavily over the set. Some recollections hint at scenes performed under unsafe circumstances, stunts improvised on the spot, costumes worn despite limited visibility, and sequences shot with minimal rehearsal due to a tightening schedule. Yet none of these accounts have ever been confirmed, because no one close to the production has been willing to speak openly. The most telling detail is the vacuum of evidence. Almost no behind-the-scenes photos exist, and documentation that typically accompanies Dohler's projects is conspicuously missing. What remains is a film that feels strangely disconnected from its own creation, as though its makers collectively stepped away and allowed it to drift into cult status without explanation. The Alien Factor survives today not just as a charmingly scrappy monster movie, but as an enigma, a production whose silence is as fascinating as the creatures it brought to life. Fact 2. The Dark Secret of Harvest Home, 1978. For a miniseries that captivated audiences with its portrayal of rural ritual and quiet menace, The Dark Secret of Harvest Home is remarkably absent from the memories of those who made it. Many cast members who enjoyed long careers afterward speak freely about their other projects, yet they almost never mention this one. When they do, their comments are brief and oddly subdued. Reports from individuals familiar with the production suggest that the long stays in remote locations wore heavily on cast and crew alike. The sense of isolation that permeates the story was echoed behind the scenes, and some participants described the shoot as emotionally taxing. Conflicts between creative teams reportedly led to abrupt changes in direction, leaving many uncertain about the miniseries' final tone. The absence of behind-the-scenes materials deepens the mystery. Press kits were minimal, interviews rare, and promotional photographs strangely limited for a high-profile television release. Attempts to gather cast commentary decades later have been unsuccessful, with many refusing to participate. The Dark Secret of Harvest Home endures as a haunting chapter in TV horror, not only for its chilling story, but for the lingering silence of those who brought it to life. Fact 3. The Appointment, 1981. The Appointment has long carried an air of mystery not because of its enigmatic plot, but because of how little anyone involved has been willing to say about it. Director Lindsay C. Vickers stepped away from the industry soon afterward, and attempts to speak with him have resulted in brief, guarded comments that evade specifics. Lead actors offer similarly sparse recollections, as if the production occupies a chapter they've locked away. Investigators trying to document the film's background consistently encounter missing pieces. Production records are incomplete, publicity materials nearly non-existent, and accounts from individuals on set are fragmented at best. Some describe the atmosphere of the shoot as unusually solemn, intensified by the haunting rural landscapes where the story unfolds. Others mention emotional strain and creative disagreements, though none elaborate beyond a few cryptic remarks. The scarcity of visual evidence is especially striking. There are no candid behind-the-scenes images, no on-set interviews, and no archival footage capturing the mood of the production. It is as if the film was created behind a veil and carefully lowered into obscurity once completed. As a result, The Appointment feels like a cinematic relic discovered by accident, a work that hints at deeper, unspoken tensions beneath its surface. Fact 4. Force of Darkness, 1985. Force of Darkness should have been another modest entry in the wave of occult thrillers of the mid-1980s, yet its production has been wrapped in an unsettling quiet ever since. Cast members rarely acknowledge it in interviews, and when they do, they choose their words carefully, suggesting discomfort rather than nostalgia. Several individuals who worked behind the scenes have openly declined to revisit the project at all. Accounts surrounding the film's shoot hint at mounting pressure from every direction. The script was reportedly in flux throughout production, with pages rewritten at the last possible moment. This unpredictability left actors unsure of their characters' motivations, and crew members scrambling to adjust lighting and effects for scenes that changed overnight. The spiritual and demonic elements of the story seem to take on an edge of real unease for some participants, who described late-night shoots as emotionally draining or strangely oppressive. Efforts by historians to assemble a retrospective have been unsuccessful. Every request for commentary or interviews has been met with silence or polite refusal, and promotional materials from the era are almost non-existent. It's rare for a film of this type and time to leave behind so few traces. In the end, Force of Darkness remains a shadowy entry in horror history, a film whose muted legacy hints at experiences its creators would rather not reopen. Fact 5. Bloodbeat, 1983. Few horror films blend supernatural folklore and rural Americana as strangely as Bloodbeat, yet its behind-the-scenes history is even more elusive. The cast and crew have consistently avoided speaking about it, and those who do comment give only fragmented memories that raise more questions than answers. Director Fabrice Ange Zafaratos disappeared from the industry soon afterward, leaving journalists with no opportunity to clarify the film's enigmatic origins. Stories surrounding the shoot suggest emotional strain and cultural clashes that made communication difficult. Some actors recall feeling disconnected from the material, unsure how the psychic samurai concept fit into the narrative they thought they were filming. Equipment troubles and scheduling delays added further stress, creating an environment where confusion overshadowed creativity. The lack of documentation is startling. No verified behind-the-scenes photography has surfaced, and promotional materials from its release are sparse to the point of non-existence. Fans searching for insight into the production find only silence and speculation. Bloodbeat ultimately feels like a dream shared by people who woke up and refused to recount it. The film remains an anomaly, a surreal vision marked by the quiet refusal of its creators to revisit whatever unfolded behind the camera. Fact 6. The Being, 1983. Among early 80s creature features, The Being stands out not for its monster, but for the lingering hush surrounding its production. Although the film features recognizable actors, most have remained conspicuously silent about the experience, offering little more than courteous phrases like, "It was a tough shoot," when pressed for details. Rumors of a strained set are plentiful. Accounts from individuals familiar with the filming suggest that resource shortages constantly hampered progress. Crew turnover was unusually high, and long nights of rushed setups left many visibly worn down. The Idaho locations, while atmospheric, added logistical challenges that compounded frustration and fatigue. Director Jackie Kong has occasionally spoken about the unpredictable nature of low-budget filmmaking, yet even she avoids going into depth when The Being is mentioned specifically. It's as though the film occupies a compartment of memory best left closed. What's most unusual is the near absence of photographic documentation. For a film with such distinct practical effects, the lack of behind-the-scenes images is baffling. Collectors and historians have searched for years, only to find the same minimal set of promotional stills recycled across releases. The being persists as an obscure creature oddity, a movie whose biggest mystery lies not in what appears on screen, but in what its creators have chosen not to reveal. Fact 7. The Dungeon Master, 1984. The Dungeon Master was conceived as an ambitious experiment, 7 directors, 7 segments, and 1 interconnected fantasy horror narrative. Yet, despite that creativity, the people behind it have maintained a striking distance from the project. When approached for retrospectives, many declined immediately. Others offered only clipped statements that hinted at exhaustion rather than enthusiasm. Behind the scenes, the film reportedly suffered from a fractured vision. Each director approached their segment with a different tone, aesthetic, and sense of storytelling, creating a production environment where no one truly agreed on what the final product should be. Actors found themselves switching from sleek sci-fi atmospheres to grimy horror settings with little transition, contributing to an overall sense of instability. Crew members who've spoken informally describe frequent miscommunication and long days spent trying to reconcile wildly different stylistic demands. Producers pushed for rapid editing to stitch the disparate pieces together, resulting in many sequences being trimmed harshly or rearranged at the last minute. The absence of substantial behind-the-scenes material suggests an unwillingness to document the chaos. Even modern releases have struggled to gather meaningful commentary, a rarity for a cult film of this era. In the end, The Dungeon Master remains a mosaic of clashing visions, remembered fondly by fans but avoided by the creators who endured its disjointed production. Fact 8. The Psychopath, 1973. The Psychopath occupies a strange corner of early 70s horror, a film that exists, is viewable, and yet feels almost unattached to the people who made it. Attempts to trace interviews or production accounts lead nowhere. Cast members who can still be contacted either decline to comment or express genuine discomfort when the film is brought up. Some have even claimed to remember almost nothing about the shoot, an unusual admission for a project of this size. Rumors from industry insiders describe a production strained by conflicting visions. The director and producers reportedly clashed over tone and pacing, leading to entire scenes being reshaped or discarded without explanation. Crew turnover was high, and working conditions were said to be tense enough that some technicians quit before filming concluded. The lack of surviving documentation is startling. No confirmed set photos, no archived press kits, not even a detailed shooting schedule. For a film released during a heavily documented era of exploitation cinema, this absence feels deliberate. What remains is a movie with a chilling ambience not solely because of its narrative, but because of the uneasy shadow cast by its own creator's silence. The Psychopath feels less like a completed film and more like a remnant of a project no one wanted to look back on. Fact 9. The Dark, 1979. At first glance, The Dark appears to be just another late 70s monster thriller, but the story behind its production reveals a turbulence that the cast and crew have rarely acknowledged publicly. Many of the film's odd choices, including the abrupt shift from a ghost story to a sci-fi creature feature, were driven by frantic, behind-the-scenes decisions that derailed the creative process and left everyone scrambling. Actors who participated have given only short, carefully worded remarks about the experience. Crew members who were present during the chaos recount, off the record, nights of rushed rewrites and reshoots, conducted with barely any preparation. The sudden change in the creature's nature from spectral entity to laser-shooting alien created confusion that permeated the entire set. Attempts to reconstruct the making of the film have led to dead ends. Archival folders for the project are shockingly empty, with no verified behind-the-scenes stills and only minimal production paperwork surviving. Even modern restorations have struggled to find contributors willing to discuss the movie. The result is a film that feels split in two-part thriller, part sci-fi experiment yet unified by the eerie silence of those who lived through its troubled creation. Fact 10. The Child, 1977. The Child is one of those regional horror films that feels as strange behind the camera as it does on screen. What little is known about the production paints a picture of confusion, frayed nerves, and an atmosphere that unsettled nearly everyone involved. Cast members who have spoken about it, which is rare, usually offer short, hesitant comments, as though recalling something they'd rather leave buried. Many others avoid the subject altogether. Accounts gathered from local residents near the filming locations describe a shoot plagued by disorganization. Scenes were rewritten on the fly, schedules changed with no warning, and equipment reportedly malfunctioned so often that entire days were lost. The eerie tone of the film seems to echo the mood of those who made it: fragmented, dreamlike, and filled with an unspoken anxiety. Perhaps the most striking detail is the near-total absence of production materials. No candid photos from set, no interviews from the time, and no surviving notes that document how the film came together. It's as if the entire process evaporated, leaving behind only a movie that feels stitched together from pieces no one wanted to claim. The Child endures as a haunting artifact of low-budget horror, a film defined as much by the silence surrounding its creation as by the unsettling imagery within it. Fact 11. The Unseen, 1980. Version 2. Among early 80 seconds horror films, The Unseen stands out not because of its content, but because of how thoroughly its production story has faded into silence. Cast members, when asked about the experience, tend to brush off the topic entirely, giving brief nods before steering interviews toward other projects. Attempts to create retrospective materials have failed repeatedly, with multiple participants declining to contribute without offering reasons. Recollections from those who were near the production hint at significant turmoil. The script reportedly underwent multiple rewrites, sometimes delivered on the very day of shooting. Creative clashes behind the scenes contributed to a heavy atmosphere, and some crew members spoke of working in deteriorating locations that made them uneasy, though none elaborated on why. The most intriguing detail is the lack of archival material. Horror films from this era almost always include at least a handful of behind-the-scenes photos, yet The Unseen has virtually none. Even promotional campaigns were sparse, suggesting that neither the studio nor the creators were eager to shine a light on how the film came to be. As a result, The Unseen lives up to its name, a film deliberately kept in the shadows, its origins obscured by the very people who brought it into existence. Fact 12. The Outing, 1987. Though The Outing presents itself as a straightforward supernatural thriller, the story behind its production is surrounded by a silence far stranger than anything depicted on screen. Cast members asked about the film often respond with tight smiles or vague statements like, "It was a rough shoot," offering nothing more. Studio archives contain scarcely any promotional material, and the few surviving interviews at the time are startlingly shallow, as if both reporters and actors were avoiding deeper questions. Accounts from individuals loosely tied to the project describe a set marked by friction. Disagreements between producers reportedly led to abrupt script revisions that left actors confused and frustrated. Crew members came and went with unusual frequency, and whispers of an on-set injury, never officially acknowledged, circulated among those who worked behind the camera. The movie's setting, a museum filled with ominous artifacts, only added to the strangeness. Some crew members claimed the building felt unsettling during late-night shoots, though none offered detailed explanations. The strangest part, however, is the complete absence of a still photographer's credit. As a result, nearly all images associated with the film today are either promotional approximations or low-resolution captures. The Outing remains on the fringes of horror history, not forgotten, but quietly avoided, a film whose making seems to have drained those involved of any desire to revisit it. Fact 13. Don't Open the Door, 1975. Don't Open the Door is one of those films that seems to have slipped through the cracks, not because it was forgotten, but because everyone involved quietly allowed it to disappear. There are no lengthy interviews, no production diaries, no cheerful recollections from the cast, just a void where a history should be. Attempts to speak with surviving crew members often lead nowhere, and some individuals listed in the credits later admitted they barely remember the project at all, offering only short, uneasy remarks before ending the conversation. Investigators who tried to piece together its past encountered a maze of missing documents and conflicting stories. Local rumors from the small Texas town where filming occurred suggest tension on set, unexplained pauses in production, and disagreements that left the atmosphere thick with discomfort. Some even claimed the director grew increasingly withdrawn, communicating only through intermediaries during particularly difficult stretches of the shoot. The film itself reflects this fragmented history. Its tone wavers between surreal dread and narrative disarray, as though it were assembled from pieces no one wanted to hold on to for long. The absence of promotional material deepens the mystery. No set photos, no archived press kits, nothing but the final cut. Don't Open the Door stands today, not just as a regional horror oddity, but as a cinematic ghost, a work whose creation seems intentionally obscured by those who lived through it. Fact 14. Dark Night of the Scarecrow, 1981. While Dark Night of the Scarecrow has earned respect as one of television's finest horror achievements, the people behind it have shown a curious reluctance to revisit the experience. Interviews that do exist are noticeably brief, with actors offering polite but guarded comments, the kind that suggests they'd rather move on than dredge up memories from the set. Director Frank DeFelitta rarely mentioned the film in later years, referring to it only in passing, as if the production were a chapter he wasn't eager to reopen. Whispers among those loosely connected to the shoot hint at a difficult working environment. The rural locations, though atmospheric on screen, were reportedly harsh and unforgiving. Equipment failures stretched the schedule, tempers frayed, and some crew members confided that night shoots felt unsettling in ways they couldn't fully explain. More than one person noted that no one liked being near the Scarecrow prop after dark, even if they didn't believe in superstition. Strangely, very little production material survives. The network produced minimal promotional content, and no substantial interviews were released during airing. Later attempts by collectors to assemble a full commentary fell apart because too many participants declined. For a film so widely praised, its creator's refusal to look back casts a long, eerie shadow. It leaves the impression that whatever haunted the fields in the story may have lingered ever so slightly behind the scenes as well. Fact 15. The Survivor, 1981. Among the more unsettling entries in Australian horror, The Survivor carries with it a peculiar silence that has baffled film historians for years. The movie itself, a somber tale of a man walking away from a catastrophe he shouldn't have survived, is overshadowed by what happened once production wrapped. Interviews from the early 80 seconds show cast members choosing their words with unusual caution, responding to questions about the shoot with vague remarks like, "It wasn't easy," before diverting to another topic entirely. Behind closed doors, it was said that the production was riddled with unease, conflicts over the script, long nights of reshoots, and stretches of filming that left the crew tense and withdrawn. Some insiders insisted that the atmosphere on set felt heavy, as though something intangible hovered just out of sight. Strangely, almost no behind-the-scenes material remains, no candid photos, no production journal, not even a discarded call sheet. Even James Herbert, whose novel inspired the film, distanced himself from the adaptation, admitting in later years that he preferred not to discuss it. Commentary tracks were never recorded, retrospective features never produced, and the creative team avoided anniversary invitations without explanation. The Survivor lingers as a completed film wrapped in a shroud, a work its creators seemed eager to step away from, leaving viewers to wonder what truly occurred during those long, uneasy days of filming. Bonus film Deathbed, The Bed That Eats, 1977. Few underground horror films have inspired as much bewildered fascination as Deathbed, The Bed That Eats. Yet the most mysterious thing about it isn't the story, it's the void surrounding its creation. Almost no one involved has spoken about the experience, and those who have offered only the faintest slivers of recollection, as if reaching back toward a memory they'd rather not disturb. George Barry, the film's elusive creator, has long embodied this silence. For decades, he seemed to vanish from the industry, and when he was eventually contacted about the film's unexpected cult resurgence, his responses were brief, hesitant, and devoid of detail. He admitted to working largely alone, but the specifics of that process, the challenges, the failures, the emotions tied to the project, remain locked away. Actors associated with the film are similarly quiet. Some cannot be found. Others appear in scattered public records but provide no commentary. A few have stated that the set felt strange, though none elaborated on what that strangeness entailed. What little documentation exists hints at a production marked by isolation, financial hardship, and long stretches where momentum nearly collapsed. The absence of material is staggering. No verified behind-the-scenes photographs, no early interviews, no promotional campaign to speak of. For years, Deathbed circulated in bootleg form, sustained only by rumor and disbelief. When it finally resurfaced legitimately, it brought with it no clearer understanding of how it had been made, only more questions. In a genre full of troubled productions, Deathbed stands apart as something almost spectral. A film that feels less produced than summoned, leaving behind a whisper rather than a record. If you've reached the end of this journey, you've stepped through some of the quietest corridors in horror history, places where the cameras stopped rolling, but the silence never left. These films aren't just unsettling because of what's on screen, but because of everything their creators refuse to say. If you know another film wrapped in secrecy, leave it below. And if you want to keep uncovering the shadows that cinema tries to hide, subscribe, because we're not done opening doors.